So my whole life, I've seen, stories about people with disabilities, or if there's a character on TV who's disabled in any way, physically, cognitively, whatever variation, they're always described in one of a few ways. One, either as this inspirational pick-me-up person who's supposed to make everybody else feel better about themselves because they're not disabled and they don't have to face the struggles that we do, and just basically to make able bodies feel better about themselves. Or they're shown as overcoming obstacles and overcoming their disability because, they're confined to a wheelchair. That phrase could really not be any more inaccurate. I am not confined to my wheelchair. I just want to put that out there. And I'm not trying to be bitter or whatever. I might get a little sarcastic at points, but that's kind of my way of dealing with this kind of stuff, because I like to bring a little bit of humor into it to lessen the intensity, because it's really not that intense. I was reading something the other day, some article, and it said confined to a wheelchair, and I was like, okay. I mean, I've seen that phrase so many different times in my life, and it's always bothered me, because confined to me means that you're restricted, and this other being or machine or something, whatever you want to call it, is restricting you from doing what you want to do. And that's not what a wheelchair does. A wheelchair is something that allows me and millions of other people to live normal lives. Like, it may seem that I'm confined to a wheelchair, and yeah, maybe because I use a wheelchair, I don't know why I just went and did it, because I do, but anyway, so it may seem that because I use a wheelchair I can't do as many things as other people do who don't use wheelchairs, and that's false. I just saw a story the other day on national news that had been on, I think, ESPN, maybe, but it was on like ABC or something like that, about a guy who went base jumping in a wheelchair. Obviously the wheelchair was not confining him from doing that, because he did it in his wheelchair. My wheelchair has actually, like, allowed me to do so many different things that I would not have been able to do if I didn't have it. And it just reminds me about this, this passage from a book that I just read, Push Girl by Chelsea Hill and Jessica Love, and I'm gonna put the link to the Goodreads page down below, because that's definitely a good read, and I would definitely suggest that you read it, whether you have a spinal cord injury or not. Obviously, I don't have a spinal cord injury, and I read it and I loved it. There's a scene where this girl's, like, enemy person at school says that she's confined to a wheelchair, and something happens, and Tara responds and is like, I'm not confined to a wheelchair. If I didn't have this wheelchair, I'd really be confined, because I'd just be sitting in my room all day not being able to go anywhere. And I was like, that is so true, because yeah, it might look like I have this big metal hunky thing tied to my butt, which I do, but I can get out of that thing, which means I'm not confined to it, because obviously right now, well, I guess maybe not obviously, but right now I'm in my car driving, and I'm not sitting in my wheelchair. I don't do literally everything in my wheelchair, I don't drive in my wheelchair, I don't sleep in my wheelchair, I don't go on planes in my wheelchair. I don't watch TV most of the time in my wheelchair. I don't take showers. I don't do a lot of stuff in my chair. Like, my butt is not glued to my wheelchair, and neither is anybody else's. No matter what you might think, it's not true. It's very true that my butt is in my wheelchair a lot, and you know, just around the house and going out and doing errands or going on trips or something, which, newsflash, we can do. See, there's that sarcasm again. Just because I use it to do a lot of things doesn't mean that I'm limited. So I don't need my wheelchair to do everything. It just helps me to do a lot of other stuff that I normally wouldn't be able to do if I didn't have it. So instead of confining me, it's actually allowed me to live a normal life. And I know people don't say stuff like confined to a wheelchair to be offensive, but it comes off that way because it's implying that this thing that's allowed me and countless other people to live normal lives and do amazing things is somehow restrictive, and therefore we can't do those things, which is so not true. And I guess what the point of this rant is, I would love to see people with disabilities represented better, and instead of, you know, oh, look what they've overcome, they're so special, they're so brave, blah, 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 blah. And instead of playing, you know, the uplifting music and the sweet music and, you know, just, oh, you get out of bed in the morning and you get dressed and you go to work or you go to the grocery store, good for you. Stop doing that and start, you know, admiring people for the work that they do instead of for doing like normal things that everybody does, which is another thing in Push Girl that I really, really love. Among other things, it talks about the inspiring word, which I like to call the I word, and how people see us as inspiring because we get up and go to school or go to the grocery store or whatever, or what have you. And it's focused so much on, look how this person's overcome this terrible thing that's happened to him. And in some cases, it's tragic. I'm not trying to take away from that, you know. Some really horrible stuff happens. But for people like me, it's kind of insulting to say, look at this terrible thing that happened to her when I was born with my disability. Like, this is all I know. This is all I honestly want to know, because my life has been pretty freaking awesome because of my spina bifida. I'm not even gonna lie about that. I mean, I've gotten to go to like 30 different states by the time I was 18, and then by the time I graduated college, it was more than that. I've been to Canada for competitions. I've been to Australia for competitions that I never in a million years would have been able to do if I didn't have spina bifida. So it just gets really insulting to me when people just automatically assume that my life is crap and that I'm miserable because I was born with spina bifida, and poor me because I don't know what it's like to walk like a normal person. But that's okay, because I get to go around in this awesome thing called a wheelchair. The point in all of this is not to be bitter, like, oh my god, you people don't know what my life is like, but just to, you know, point out and try and, you know, give more perspective on how things come off. If you take one thing away from this video, just please think about the phrasing that you use and the way you look at people, because I guarantee that they see it a completely different way.